When you read tech articles and social posts, it appears like, oh, raising a round is the only way to grow a business. But what would happen if you repurposed all that time and effort spent on raising capital and focused on bootstrapping your startup instead? Our guest is a seasoned founder and investor who understands the value of bootstrapping a startup before you begin raising capital. And boy, are we going to be mining some startup gems today. Stay tuned for the Startup Life live show. Let's glow. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Startup Life Live Show. I'm your host, Ande, Lyons, 4 times founder and startup champion to founders around the world. And after raising 4 businesses of my own, I now share founders' startup stories to help newly minted founders and business owners find the solutions they need to succeed and the inspiration they need to succeed. And I just want to thank you so much for carving out time to up your founder game, because as you do better, your business is going to do better. And look, this isn't something like you've got a how-to book on the side, how to grow your business in 10 easy steps. You are in it. And sometimes you really need to hear another founder's startup stories, right? To find that solution, that resource, that aha moment, or just that shot of inspiration you need to keep solving all the problems you are facing every day. I often say 1 minute you're popping the champagne and the next minute you're crying into it. But the beauty is that you keep getting up again and again to move your business forward. So I'm so proud of you. If you're joining us live or even via replay, I am so grateful that you tuned in. And please say hello in the comment threads. And for those of you who are live, be sure to post questions and feedback, because we all learn and grow together. We are live right now on hopefully LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn was having a few challenges with live, but supposedly we're live on Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook right now. And if you click that like button, then it will go out. This show right now and this conversation will go out into your feed and really help us reach more founders. So I'm so grateful for that. And if you're tuning in via YouTube and you haven't done so already, please click the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you can receive an alert whenever I post a new show. But hey, guess what? There's another way to get alerts when I post a new show. And that is right here. Hold on, let me bring up my wonderful piece. It's the meetup group. We have a great group of folks here in the Startup Life Live meetup group. And when you join the meetup group, you're going to get an alert whenever we post a new show. And that way you'll find a founder who is in your industry or has a story that you feel you can really resonate with and grab some great gems from. Also, you can tune in, listen to the Startup Life Live show very easily on all of your favorite podcast platforms, or you can go to my website and just click on the podcast tab, because sometimes it's easier to listen, right, to the show than to try to watch that video wherever you are. I also want to say, hey, if you resonate with the show's mission of amplifying diverse founder voices while serving first-time founders around the world, please reach out to me to learn more about how you can make a greater impact on the startup ecosystem through sponsoring the Startup Life Live show. So you can just reach out to me at Ande@AndeLyons.com for sponsorship information. All right, so I get to introduce you to our amazing guest now, and I love this part. I'm going to put up a little marketing piece while I tell you a little bit about our guest, Naveen Prasad. He's the founder and managing partner of Agilis Advisors and Agilis Capital, where he manages a mandated portfolio in excess of $4 billion. The firm is operational in over 10 markets, and Naveen spearheads and the leadership team for deal sourcing, fund placements, M&A, and fundraising transactions. Originally from India and now settled in Berlin, Germany, Naveen has built ventures from scratch and is also an active early-stage investor, mentoring startups and venture programs such as EIT, Cocoon, and Startupbootcamp. Okay, seriously, this is the man you want to be learning from today. Let me bring him into the room. Woohoo, Naveen! Welcome to the show.
Hello.
I'm so happy you could join us today, or What time is it where you are in Berlin right now?
6 p.m. Yeah, out here.
Okay. So for
So
you, you're
not
joining
too
us
late.
this evening,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful that you're here to share your wisdom and let folks know some of your thoughts and insights and lived experiences as a founder. But before we get started, what are you feeling grateful for today, both personally and professionally? What's happening in your world that you're going, that feels really good right now. I'm happy about that.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me, Andy. Appreciate the time. I love your exuberance, and I hope I can take some part of it, after the show. So what I'm thankful for, right? Honestly, I'm thankful that we are all healthy, right? We live in very uncertain times,
That's right.
and we move a few steps ahead, and then something is holding us back a few steps behind, right? Where I am currently, Germany, normally safe, but we are going through a little
Yeah.
tough time, with the cases and everything rising. So first of all, I'm really thankful that, me and my family are healthy, people around me are healthy, and, we are able to live this day to our fullest, right?
Yes.
Um, and then, yeah, we have definitely,
And and then
living in those
and then
times.
professionally, do you have a win, something that's feeling really good that you're grateful for with your work?
Absolutely. So we had a good week in general, right? So feel good about it. It's I think icing on the cake to be ending my week and Friday and our professional work with your show. So that's
Yay.
that's the cherry on top.
Yay. Well, you know, I've had heavily funded businesses, angel investment, and then, as I always say, my charming personality, bootstrap businesses. But when you bootstrap, there's so many things that you can learn by having a lean startup, and also by bootstrapping, we know that you can increase the value of your business, founders, when you do go to raise capital. But let's start off before we dive deep into bootstrapping, or should you raise money right now with your business. Let's talk a little bit about you, Naveen, and find out what called you to become an entrepreneur. We all have different ways. Mine, of course, was I use the analogy of the stray cats yowling at the door until I let them in and fed them, i.e., the reluctant entrepreneur. But tell us what your launch and origin story as an entrepreneur is.
Sure. So as you mentioned in my introduction, right, I originally come from India, land of varied cultures. I've been in Europe for the past 11 years now, Germany 6 years, so more or less settled here. But in my primitive years, right, that is where I think I picked up the nuances of entrepreneurship. We come from a country where we are, very on our toes, right? We try to find solutions. We'll not hold and sit back and wait for something. So I've grown up, taking some very inspirations from, the likes of Dhirubhai Ambani, the Tatas, and so on and so forth, who, have built their businesses to multi-billion, empires from ground up.
They
Yeah,
sure
when there was
have.
nothing. When probably when I grew up, I hardly knew about venture capital. Not that I'm too old, but in the relative terms, right? I mean, there's so much buzz around venture capital and what's happening there. Especially, if you look into 2020, it's been a
Sure.
blast kind of a year for those matters, right? But
Right.
growing up, I've just been inspired by these gentlemen, right? These who have been able to grow their businesses, and I think a part of that acumen also came from my family. So my father was in a professional, career, but apart
Hmm.
from that, pretty much everyone in my family have been associated with businesses here and there, and I've been very curious on that front, right? Like, for example, even when I used to see small businesses, around the beach and all, I always used to think, how did they start about it, right? Why did they think of doing this versus, not taking up a job and sitting in this, right? And the third reason could potentially be that, I'm just very curious about everything, right? So, and at one point, I realized that you don't find solutions to everything, but probably have to, uh, get that initiative and solve that problem yourself. So it took me a while, but then I think I did figure out that best associates with me as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly how you feel about that, especially with, I go into any business. I don't care if it's a pop up or it's a sky rise, then they've filled every single floor of that high rise. I always wonder, like, how are they bringing that money in?
Yeah.
What is their cost of goods sold? What are their margins? What are they doing with the profits? It's a sad state of affairs sometimes because that's what my curious mind wants to do and go,
No, but I'm very similar, right? I'm always like, and then I always think, what was the starting point for them? Where did
right.
this start about doing that to come to that stage and then even beyond, right? So probably that's yeah.
Yeah. And Naveen, like when you're looking at the businesses on the beach, right? I always am so proud of anyone who creates a product, figures out how to make it in abundance, right? Have a lot of units, and then sells it and is able to have a profit left over and do it again and again and have repeat sales. I don't care, unicorn or you're feeding your family. I just want to say, those of you who are doing that, you give me goosebumps. I'm so in awe and wonder, and I know you feel the same way, right, Naveen?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yay.
Couldn't agree more, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your first business, because you were more in the tech industry, and I know you've done some fintech and some others. Just tell us just a little bit about those businesses. Like, for example, maybe a win, like what it was like to start one of them. Just share a little bit of your lived experience as a founder.
Yeah. So I think when you start, right, you have more failures than wins, but then that's how you kind of
We
learn
love
through
the
it. And
failure
yeah,
stories.
and
Yes.
yeah, it's like I think I was chatting to someone with some other topic, and he made a very good point. We don't have failures, or we don't fail. We always learn, right?
Right.
And that's even though it might sound very bookish, that's exactly how an entrepreneur's life is, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of entrepreneurship or to start something has been there for me since I left college, right? But I just wanted to be sure that I'm prepared. So what I did actually is I started my first venture as a side project while I was doing my MBA, right? So I just wanted to test waters on that. So I started an e-commerce price comparison company based out of India while I took a sabbatical to do my MBA. In a way, it made my life very hectic, right? Because you have these long hours courses, and then you have to work on this. But the point of my career, I was at, let's say, from a risk reward perspective, at a much better place, right? I said, look, if I want to test, because one thing is wanting to do something, and you actually learn stuff or do stuff, and how difficult it is, or whether you're made for it or not when you actually do it. So I just took the chance. I had two wonderful co-founders, started the business, launched it while I was studying. That was a success, and since then, I've just not looked back. Then I happened to move to Europe,
And what compelled you to move to Europe, and why Germany, and why Berlin?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a coincidence that I landed in Berlin. But when I landed, I just felt that I was at the right place to be at the part of what I wanted to do as an entrepreneur. So I actually moved to Europe as part of exchange, studies from my college in India, and then that's how I moved to France. From then, I worked with Amazon for a brief period of time, and then moved to Berlin with a company called Rocket Internet.
Yeah.
They are one of the pioneers of the startup industry, and a lot of credit and attributes should go to them for where Berlin has shaped today in that, right? And probably that also gave me more inspiration and acumen to start my own companies in Berlin. And it's been tremendous, right? So 6.5 years back when I landed, startup ecosystem was good, but what it is today, it's tremendous, right? It's on the verge of leaving behind London to be the fastest growing European tech city. So I think I was just there at the right time.
I also really love the thread of your background and of your lived experience. I too went and earned my MBA, and I tell you, it just really helped me with my own feelings of
Yeah,
credibility, given that my
exactly.
background that had been there, but also it took me to another level of really understanding business and has served me to this day. And so I love that you did that. And I love that you did some side hustles. Founders, side hustles are so important and they're bona fide. Okay. Side hustles have a much greater chance of success than those who say, "Oh, I'm just going to quit work and start this business." And that's because you're able to do your beta ahead of time, right, Naveen? You're able to get out and test while you still are able to keep a roof over your head and food in your family's tummy. And so
Yeah.
that,
Case in point, MailChimp, right? They are one of my best examples. I quote that very often when I'm speaking to or when I'm in talk shows because I love the story, right? And that's where I think I wish I had that much of understanding and empathy when as they had 12 years back.
right.
But to read, to see what they did and what they achieved in this period
You
was
talk about
kind of,
MailChimp?
what MailChimp, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
So
folks.
it's incredible what Mark and Dan have done. They
Yes,
started that as a side hustle, right?
they
They
absolutely
didn't raise
did.
anything. Yeah,
And they sold for over $1 billion, everyone. Okay. So think about that. I mean, they might have had a little bit of family and friends that came in because you want to share the wealth, right? With those you know and love. But
12,
otherwise,
$12 billion. Yeah,
yeah, tw-
12 billion
12
dollars.
billion. All right. There we go. That's a lot of money. And when you're not having to share that with a VC or you didn't get the pressure of sharing that with a VC, it's amazing. We'll talk a little bit more about their story as we move along. So, how did you end up launching Agilis? I mean, what compelled you? I mean, you were a founder, you love doing the business side of things and growing a business. What had you switch and pivot into creating something that's more of a fund, more of a way to help founders do better and know more and improve their skill sets and also invest? Tell us about that.
Sure. Um, so a few years being an entrepreneur and raising capital for the ventures that I was part of, I did realize it's not easy, right? And I started to have more empathy towards entrepreneurs. I identified some acute gaps in the market, right? Because on one hand, you have these tailwinds, and you read a lot of news about startups raising capital. And then when I was on the other side of the table, a lot of when I became an angel investor, I suddenly came across so many startups that they were really struggling to raise the capital, right? So the biggest gap I saw in the market is, if you're a winner, probably the VC circles knows you all, and then there is a big tailwind that no one is, being catered to. It's not that uh, they're not good or something. It's just that it's a little disappointing to say, but there's a herd race going on, right? And
Yes,
everyone wants to catch those.
that's
But if you
right.
see that, right, you probably hear or talk about only 2%, or let's say maximum 5% of the startups that are there who are
That's
successful. I'm not
that's
even
right.
talking about the 90 odd that fail, right? But among those tailwinds, right, what I saw is they have good team, they have good concept, but they don't have the right connects, right, to have those VCs. And on the other hand, when I was raising capital myself and was in the investor circle, I saw that investors are facing difficulties deploy the capital again themselves, right? And I'm not talking again about the tier one. I think they're well covered. They deploy more than the capital they have and all, right? But if you consider 10,000 plus VCs, anyone would know not more than 100, right? If you're a good one.
Right.
Most of them don't even know those 100, right? And that's the gap that we wanted to capture through Agilis Capital. Said, look, you, instead of you as a founder or a company. So by the way, we don't only cater to startups. We also cater to mid-market and corporate companies. But for the relevance of this show, I will just talk about startups. So
Sure.
what we give them is give them a platform where they say, look, you as a startup, you don't have to pitch to hundreds of those different VCs or investors, but you through our platform, apply or be part of the uh, funnel, and it automatically goes to uh, 1,000 plus investors. Now, I'm a big believer of tech, right? And I see technology can solve a lot of problems, right? Even when you look into the VC industry landscape, there's a metrics which somehow most of the VCs are proud of, is they apparently look into thousands of deals and did only one of them, right? So that's a pipeline deal flow. And I've always been like, why is this a metric to be proud of, right? I mean, I see
Exactly.
that as spending a lot of time, energy, efforts on doing that, right? And if you look into most of them, if not 90%, at least 60, 70% of them, they just don't match the investment thesis, right?
That's
And
right.
there are some parameters which could be used through the technology to just filter those, right? So we are giving them a very, very robust deal flow platform through our platform.
I love that. And also, what you just mentioned is so true. And I started the show off talking about that, the time and effort to raise money. And I'm telling you, every time I turn around, there's another VC firm popping up, another fund, right? And they're raising the money, no problem. How are they making the decisions to put money into deals? That's always fascinating to me. And who are they doing it for? Because we keep getting told, oh, all this money is out there, but to your point, and the market that you're serving, it really is for those folks who have the track record, who are looking at Series A, B, and C, and so they're already firmly established in their category. So this is why we wanted to talk about bootstrapping today and why it can be so advantageous, even though every time you turn around, everybody's trying to prepare you to raise money. Can we talk a little bit about this now, about how we can, as founders, and I've had to raise millions as well as thousands, millions from VCs, thousands from angels, and the time. And then after you raise the money, the pressure you're under to deliver when you're still so young as a startup and you're making mistakes, and as you should, and you should have plenty of runway. Let's talk about what your thoughts are. What would you advise a startup founder when they're looking at, okay, how can I get the oxygen that my business needs? And still, I mean, on Tuesday's guest, he was talking about the founder's pain point. I need to, get money in the door, but I also need to sell the product. What are your thoughts about this dilemma many founders face?
Yeah, you're very right, right? So, as an angel investor, I get this question asked many times, right? And not only questions, I see real genuine dilemma that entrepreneurs are, because on one hand, you see so much going around in the funding route. There's so much talk about it. Some of the founders, they kind of, not some, I would say most of them, right? They actually assume that this is the by default route, right? So when you're starting, you just have to raise. But this, the first thing that most entrepreneurs, or probably all of them, should do is sit back and understand the most important question, which is, why do you want the funding, right? Is it now that you need it? And most importantly, why do you need the funding? Because if they don't have a robust answer to that, that I would say is a pretty good sign already that you're just trying to hop the bandwagon that might not be absolutely right for you,
Right.
right? um,
And then, Naveen, what are some of the ways that we can be clever as founders to bootstrap? Because it's one thing to talk about bootstrapping, but if you don't come from a group, a network that happens to have 5 or 10K hanging around to do a quote family and friends round, um, how can we find ways to help that business get the oxygen it needs to keep moving
yeah,
forward? Because a lot of times, you've got the tech, but you have to develop that tech and you got to get the customers to buy the tech, but you don't have any money to really develop the tech. It can be a real challenge. And that's why I think a lot of founders tend to go, well, it might be easier for me to go and raise the capital to then develop the tech versus developing the tech on the cheap, on the lean.
exactly. And I was just going to compliment on what I said earlier. It's like, when you're asking why do you want funding, you'd also need to figure out how much of funding do you need, right?
Right.
And not just going to the bandwagon and say, okay, because I'm getting pitch decks now wherein they're there's an amount where I see, on a seed fund and pre-seed fund, on almost 65% of the startups, right? And it's hard to believe that all of them from different verticals, be it prop tech, digital health, and this, they're all kind of working out the same figure. So, there's enough hard reasons to believe that this is just because of the bandwagon, right? And that's where there's also a little bit of mismatch, right? So you just need to sit back and see how much do you really need to launch that. And there's no harm in raising that. And to that end, I'm a strong advocate of angel funding, right? Do you really need the millions, or you could do it with thousands, or you could do it 500,000, 250,000, and do it, right? And why I say angel funding is, for me, angel investors are strategic investors, right? They bring in much more value than plain vanilla money, right? They have a plethora of knowledge. So most of the angel investors, for example, in my circle, are ex-entrepreneurs, people who have had exits. They are serial founders and so on and so forth. So they come with a plethora of experience of, they've been in your shoes before that, and they can tell you 10 lessons that would help your company grow in a way organically that you would like to, right? To that, yeah. And yeah, please.
No, I think you just brought up a phenomenal point, and we have a few questions I'm going to bring up from the crowd here because they're very thoughtful as well. Hey, Rajesh, he's saying, Naveen, great initiative sharing your experience with startups. I am advising a niche startup in retail domain, filling the gap, addressing returns and sizing issues. Oh boy, that's a great problem to solve. Can you share the platform you mentioned for checking out funding options? Andy, great energy. Stay safe. Thanks. Mwah. Thank you for that as well. I think it's the Agilis, right?
Agilis Capital. I don't know if you can
I'll bring
put it
that
there on the link, but it's like AGILIS.CAPITAL capital.
Yeah. And I'll put it into the show notes as well, but I'll just pop it into the comment section for you as well. And then, so thank you so much for that great comment. And then further down, hold on, here we go. Sunil, Naveen, what do angel investors most look for as opposed to VCs? Oh, this is such a great question. This is why we love to have you bring in your questions, folks, because we want to squeeze all the gems out of Naveen today that he has to share. What are your thoughts on this, Naveen?
Definitely a good question, right? So as angels, I think the most important aspect that we look while investing is the team, right? The core team, the founding team, whether they are the right fit to do this. And more importantly, are they asking the right questions? So I'm a big fan of people asking questions, right? And that's how I kind of make out, because at the stage that we invest in, there's high risk and there's also no certainty of how this would go, right? But as long as you're asking the right questions, you have that vision of what could be achieved. We are there to support, right? If I get a feeling that, okay, they are in the right direction, asking the right questions, and with the right amount of support, they can achieve this, that's where we will come in.
Love that. Love that. And folks, you got to read your angel investors. You got to read the landscape. And I have a great document, 10 questions to, not 10, I think it's more than that, questions to ask angel investors when you are, and just email me, Andy@andylyons.com. I'll send it to you. It's so important. We work so hard to prepare for the investor questions, right, Naveen? But you as a founder, you've got to make sure that you are finding the best angel investor for your business. And, to get back to Sunil's question too, the VCs are just going to be looking for a shorter runway, right, Naveen? Whereas I think angels are going to be part of the team for a little longer. They're not looking for the exit as much as they're looking for the experience. Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Yes. I mean, honestly, we are looking for exits, right? And everyone does. But we have a longer cycle, and we don't have metrics to monitor every quarterly, right? And add that pressure, right? So you know how it is in the VC circle. You have quarterly reports, half-yearly reports, yearly reports, and all, and everything should look rosy on that, right? So you have that added pressure coming to this, and that's the entire cycle because they have, their LPs to report to, and so on and so forth. The whole drill down is because in the end, a venture capital fund is also funded by some external investors who they are responsible to have that. We are putting our personal money, right? So obviously we are about that, and we are looking for exit, but we are not going to bump on you every month, quarter, and keep asking, as long as we see that's a vision, and we would be there for you for a longer term, definitely.
That's right. And I also, my experience and what I've seen with other companies who have brought in some amazing angel investors. Can I tell you my favorite angel investor story? There's this company in the early 2000s who had come up with an app for the phone to track, your running. Okay. It was for runners. Well, they nailed it, but Motorola, NYKAA, nobody was turning that feature on, the GPS tracking feature yet. And so they had to keep waiting for technology to keep up, and they were working so hard. The angel investors said, look, you guys have had your heads down for 4 years. Now that's coming on. We know everybody's turning on GPS. You need to go take your families and go on a vacation for 2 weeks and just have a good time and replenish and refresh so you can come back. And they paid for the vacation.
Awesome.
And they came back after that 2 weeks. They raring, and they had a phenomenal exit. They sold to some big company, and everybody was happy. But I think that's the beauty of a good angel investor, right? Is a lot of times, yes, they're able to write a $50,000 check, or a group of them can come together for $250,000. But a lot of times they can be operating angels, right? So they understand the operations of your business, and they bring so much more value. And so I've got another great question coming up here from Krishna Shu. While funding a company, what kind of traits do you look for in the founder or in the idea? Oh, great question. Thank you for that. What are your thoughts, Naveen?
Good question indeed, right? So I have a slightly different purview of looking into businesses, right? So for me, yes, there are businesses, there are consumers, there are customers. But for me, everything is P2P, right? I like to do business on a people-to-people level and not business to business. To that end, I look into first, again, I think there are two parts to it. One is if I'm an angel, and the second is probably if I'm helping them, and what in general the investment landscape is looking into for them, right? As an angel, pretty straightforward, right? I look to see if I can connect with them. If I can be the right support, not only monetary, but in other senses as well, and see if they are doing. I strongly also like if this is a cohesive team, right? You would have heard, we have all seen it, right? The first year is the toughest, right? You need to be working in tandem as the co-founder group together, and you need to look into the eye of your other co-founder and see that kind of just got that. Yes, are you in it for the long term, like I am, or the others are? That kind of cohesiveness is very, very important.
Right.
Now, secondly, in terms of the investors and raising capital for companies, fortunately or unfortunately, these are very, very financial metrics driven, right? So when you are pitching, be very clear on your numbers. You cannot not know your numbers being a founder. You cannot say that I'm a marketing guy or I'm an operations guy and I have no clue about the numbers of how the vision is. You can have an idea of vision, but you need to be clear on how that translates into the economic and monetary sense of it, right? To have that. So as a founder, I think I always advise, and there have been cases where they're falling short of it. We are also helping them train that and come to that stage that you're able to pick up any answers that would come on that front.
So key. I'm going to bring this up, folks. How to calculate the LTV CAC ratio. I've got a great video on my YouTube channel. Go check it out under Andylicious Advice. You got to know your numbers. So if you're in operations or a tech guy, you can't say, those pesky marketing numbers. No, you need to understand LTV, long-term value. CAC is customer acquisition cost, because that way you understand what your marketing return on investment is, because a lot of times you're raising money to go bring customers on board. Yes, you might be raising money for the tech as well, but it's important to know those numbers, know them all, And this is what, Agilis helps with, right? You can help folks nail down what their numbers are, know what they need to be looking for. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You have the opportunity for
Yeah, there's
that.
still a team helping you with that.
Yes, I love that. And so to get more into the details of bootstrapping, because, we keep wanting to go there, folks, because you have to understand, if you go to raise money and you've just launched your business, you're going to be giving away a lot of your ownership, and that's just not good. So when you take the time to figure out how can you become a lean machine, sometimes it means families have to find a lower cost of living, or you need to find a lower cost of living so that you can be lean, or do the side hustle so that you can get the traction you need, because then you add value to your business. So when you go to raise money, you're not giving so much of it away. What are your thoughts about building in public? Sometimes folks will say, okay, we're going to, do our beta, but we're going to do it in public. We're going to be building, and maybe people can join us via equity crowdfunding or some other ways. What are your thoughts about that?
Definitely something that I also recommend, right? Especially if that is something that attracts a broader public, right? If you're doing some high deep tech, where making the technology or the use case understand to a larger audience is difficult, I would probably recommend to shy away from that. But if you have something where you really can convince the public, or let's say it can attract eyeballs to a wider audience, that's definitely something that I could recommend as well, right? In that, obviously, then you also need to see how much of equity you are willing to dilute at an early stage, right? I've met founders. I mean, I've had so many stories of founders who have moved to the exit stage, with only 2% and less of equity at an IPO stage and exit for all that, and then they're ruining themselves, right? It's not that they didn't make an exit, but and when you get entangled in this chain, you pretty much lose control very fast. It's not that you intended to do it, right? It's just that your first round was big, you diluted this, and then you keep diluting it on. So if you typically diluted 25% plus in your first round, and let's say you are 3 co-founders, you're already in the minority, right? And then you keep multiplying that, and that chain is that's sometimes nothing wrong, right? In some cases, if you have a very capital intensive business, you probably say, okay, that's a compromise I make. But in most cases than not, I see founders actually doing about it and feeling bad about it. So you need to have that control, right? And I have a very good example there, actually.
Good, share.
So impressive, for entrepreneurs who are looking to have a right mix of bootstrapping versus capital raising and still having a good exit. There's a company called in India, it's called NYKAA, NYKAA. It got recently listed, right? A huge IPO, I think around 1 crores in this. And there are two fun facts.
We heard about it. It was amazing.
Yeah. 2 fun facts, right?
Yeah.
Female founder. And at the time of exit IPO, she owned more than 50% of the shares, right? So 52 point something.
Female founders.
That's an amazing story, right? So anyone who's looking into, and you're not talking about, smaller exits. It was in excess of $10 billion, I think the IPO, or 6 billion odd.
And she started from scratch.
Started from scratch completely, right? The second thing that I really liked about this example is, so in general, e-commerce business, right, and more so in India, is very promotion driven, right? Profitability really takes the tag end. People figure out, are just focusing on consumer growth, this or that. To that extent, none of the other e-commerce companies in India are profitable, and also others probably in other regions as well. But she never compromised on that, right? So she wanted to give the superior experience to the consumers without compromising on the price. So she didn't take the route of, reducing the prices or giving this. And the concept there was, if you offer a good product and a good service, people will come back to you. So, and that's exactly what happened, right? So she didn't have to burn too much money. They are the third learning aspect which really inspires me is they are the profitable, right? They are profitable, even though minutely they are profitable.
And I know founders, you can be sitting there thinking, getting to profitability, how can I do that? Or everybody else is charging all this other money. again, I'm going to say walk down the bread aisle and look at all the different prices, and you can position yourself just as this wonderful female founder of NYKAA,
Yeah.
or just NYKK.
NYKAA.
Yeah, did, which is I'm going to price this so I can stay in business. And this is the beauty of doing really good branding, really good marketing, and as Naveen said, really good customer service. Because I tell you, when you get that great customer service, I'm a huge fan of Geico, for example. They trip over themselves to take such good care of me when anything happens. Anybody, State Farm, anybody can call me and say, yes, but nope, don't care. Do not care.
And the large part of that learning is, right, because she was able to maintain majority shareholding, she could direction the company as she wanted to, right?
That's right.
It's often not said, but you have tremendous pressure from investors, even on your vision. And then you don't have those free hand to do, or let's say execute your vision completely. Again, nothing negative about VCs.
Right.
In some cases they even give you the right vision, but when you have started something, it's your baby, it's your child. You
That's right.
want to position it in a way you want it to, right? And she would probably not been able to do that, just on the point that we were discussing, right? It's okay to raise. She did raise, right? But to ensure that you have enough control in the company to do that. And that's why again, we move back to the same point that we need to be aware of how much we want to raise and what is needed, instead of just going in the bandwagon.
Oh, I have a great example for that too with our .com. We had a great offer from Bear Stearns. Citibank made Bear Stearns rest in peace, and they imploded during the 2008 demise. But we had a great offer, and that would have carried us through the whole bubble bursting. But the VCs that we had on at that point had enough voting power, and so it was no. And it was so folks, it's worth it. You get the longer runway too, which I think is so important, Naveen, is that, you may feel like, okay, if I had that money, I could do this now, but you're going to learn so much from being the lean startup, and you're going to have much longer time to figure it out. It's okay to take a little longer going to market. Hey, Natalie, thanks for tuning in. Natalie's asking, do you recommend bootstrapping in a competitive space? We are an e-commerce B2C space, and though we would like to bootstrap, it might backfire. What are your thoughts? Oh, great question, Natalie.
That's a very, very good question, right? As I mentioned briefly, right, there are some businesses that are very capital intensive. And I do agree, you might be killing yourself earlier if you're not going that route, right? But again, I think the first point I'd repeat is you need to be sure of what you want to raise and what helps you grow, instead of just raising. Now, whether to bootstrap versus funding, it really depends on your idea and business model, right? So
Right.
It's not that one fits all. It doesn't work, right? So you need to compare your idea versus the business model. And I also think it's also about personal appetite, right? I think it's also a lot to do with how founders feel about it, and how they would like to see it grow versus doing it. So yes, I think short answer to that is see how much you need and approach it that way. What I advise most of the startups in the space is you should have at least a runway of 12 months, right?
Right.
Less than that, you are back to fundraising in, again, 3 months, right? Because the whole cycle of fundraising itself is long, which is why, by the way, we also started Agilis Capital, right? To just shorten the entire part of it. You start with pitching to one investors, and by the time you're investing, pitching to 50 investors, 3 months are already gone. Then the initial due diligence starts, the longer due diligence, and by the time you close, you're talking about 6 to 8, 9 months, right?
Right.
So ideally, you should have runway for at least 18 months, if not minimum 12 months.
Right. Now, you just said so many important things. And Natalie, there's some great angel investors out there, and that's just such a different play. So if you really, especially with an e-commerce site where you really have to invest a lot in the tech and to make sure that you've got your returns handled and your customer service happening, you might need a extra 100,000. And so just be really clear about how you're going to leverage that capital and be able to illustrate how you've bootstrapped to date, all the great problems that you've solved, showing what a great founder you are, fab female founder you are, and making and helping your business grow. So thank you so much for that great question. And we have another one here. From Krishnan Shu. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. He's saying Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg fund different companies with income from one company, i.e., funding SpaceX and Tesla from PayPal, or buy your competitors and expand, like Facebook buying WhatsApp and Instagram. That's some high level investment conversation there, right, Naveen? I mean, we should all be
probably
that far
not
along.
suited. Yeah, probably not suited for an angel investor like me. But it's actually a good question, right?
Right.
Very, very kind of, because what I feel is the market in general overall in the space would be divided into these two kind of companies, right? One which is completely innovating, using that capital and then reinventing, and the others where they said, okay, we cannot do everything. Let's just be the best in that and keep acquiring, right? So probably, with all disclaimer, I may not be the right person to answer this, but my personal preference is obviously the Elon Musk route, right? I'm a big believer of innovating. That's what caught me to this space to be, first of all, because of the inquisitiveness, curiosity, and wanting to solve a problem. I became an entrepreneur. And I definitely, he's definitely one of the role models, right? With how he approaches stuff and then moves back to doing and solving problems. He's also an epitome example of, why you can't only solve one problem, solve multiple problems if you have that thing, and keep innovating. I think he has been successful because he kept innovating, right? And using that.
And he set the culture for innovation, because I tell you, when you get that big, when you have so much systems and procedures put into place, innovation drops off, okay? Because the culture is set up to deliver results instead of making mistakes in the innovation process. So that requires a certain type of leadership. And of course, you all know that I would be very happy to be putting out more of the female founders who are doing equally phenomenal in that space as well. And, we have here in the US, I don't know what it's like globally. Maybe you can speak to this, Naveen, but here, certainly in the US, 2% or less go to our diverse founders, our female founders, our people of color and Latinx founders, and so our LGBTQ founders. A lot of times that's because the numbers that are being tracked are more like the VC numbers, which they tend to invest in Series A, later stage. And by then, it's usually the same old, excuse the expression, white guys who have already had a track record and had gotten the money easier earlier. So what are you seeing internationally, globally, as far as getting that money into the diverse founders, like the female founder from NYKAA in India? She bootstrapped her way to success. She's going to be able to, now invest in other companies. What have you seen on the landscape and in the ecosystem?
So the issue of diversity is there, right? I mean, we cannot be ignorant about it. That's definitely there, as you said, in US, also in Europe. But what I really see, especially in this part of the world, is there's a lot of initiatives to change that, right? People are getting more and more aware of it, and there are initiatives that are being taken to solve that, right? I mean, if you talk about the venture capital space itself, right? Forget about funding and investing. If you look into the diversity in the management of the venture capital itself, that's quite skewed, right? And I think the change should start from there, right? Until you have that thought process within your team and to do it. And I've been amazed to see some VCs being founded here with a lot of inclusion towards diversity. It's still nascent, but it's happening, right? It's at least happening. People do see the need to hire, more and more women investors. Again, I think there should definitely be equality in talent, but at least the thought process of improving that diversity is there, right? You can measure the top of your funnel. You can invest directly in emerging fund managers, which women fund managers and so on.
Right. But also having a deep understanding that anybody who is female, BIPOC, LGBTQ, or other abled are going to have much greater hurdles as they're building their business, which means they have built up their tenacity, persistence, and resilient muscles. But you have to understand that when you're investing in them as well. So I think we're, as you said, it's nascent, but the education is happening. We're moving the ball forward, so to speak, and it may be happening a little bit faster. But the reality too is that it's just a really small percentage of companies that do get funding. And that's why the bootstrap part is so important for you founders to really understand that sometimes it's this big myth, oh, they're writing checks left and right. You still have to work really hard and really creative and innovatively in how you keep moving your business forward with the least amount of outside resources other than sales with your customers. Yes, Naveen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And
so
I'm very glad that you brought this topic out, right? I think more and more people need to talk about it. And that's the first step, right? You need to talk about it. You need to I think that more or less people are aware, or at least they know about this topic, but they don't talk about it more often, right? And that's definitely the need of the hour.
And speaking of which, what do you wish you had known when you were launching your first business, RE funding versus bootstrapping? I know it was a lean machine. I know you did it as a side hustle and you had some great co-founders, but what were some of the things that you had wished that you had learned ahead of time before that now?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to my mind is, I wish I had known more angels and, and how they invested in this. I think this space has grown more rapidly now, or probably because I'm in this space now, I know more about it. But at least when I started up, right, I didn't know which angels to contact, right? I didn't know how to contact them, right? I couldn't find, apart from some databases here and there, a real channel where I could, pitch them my idea or take feedback from them, more importantly than that, right? So I think that definitely helps. And I also advise the startups currently, right? Do not ignore angels, right? They can be some of your best ambassadors, right? Because if they like your product, they talk about it, and you're just getting free organic growth from them apart from your money. So that's definitely the first point. The second would be, to identify our inflection points early on, right? So what's working, what's not, right? Validate, because when we start something, we do it on assumptions, right? Because I'm assuming that this is not happening or this would not happen, I am starting there. I'm taking the courage to do it, right? Yes, we can do surveys, we can, validate it, pre-validate it, and so on and so forth. But once you actually have a prototype running, identify what's working, what's not, what are your inflection points? Because more often than not, and I've done it in probably all my startups now, we start with assumptions. We think, hey, you know what? These things would be the key winners. They will be a cash cows. And when you launch, boom, boom, that's the thing that's not working. Everything else.
That's right.
So and so on and so forth, right?
As we say on the Startup Life Live show, prove that value prop. And that means not just before, right, Naveen? Because a lot of times the customers are going to say, oh, yes, yes, yeah. And then you launch and it's like, hello, where'd you go?
Correct. And then pivot, right? So just pivot. The market tells you what's working, what's not. Be open to feedback. Yeah. Use that, cultivate that, and pivot. And most of those successful startups you see, they've just pivoted, right?
They have, absolutely, because they listened to their customers and the customers told them what they wanted. And it's amazing what happens if you stay agile, just like Agilis, right? Agilis does stay agile. And this is wonderful what you're providing with your platform, which is, the connections, the advice and support. The best thing founders can do for each other is to support each other. When you get in part of groups like you have with Agilis Capital, they can learn from each other, meet each other. But more importantly, you have pulled together a network of angels and other investors to help founders. Because look, founders, most of you who are tuning into the Startup Life Live show have never done this before. So who do you have in your network? Usually nobody. And you're having to start building up those relationships with angel investors. And we've had a few angels on the show that we can also send you to have to learn more from those episodes as well. But they really are more helpful provided you find aligned angel investors. So, Naveen, what are you working on now that you feel is going to help you meet your vision for Agilis? What's going on in that world for you?
That's a very interesting question.
Because as we grow, you've had this for a while. As we grow, our business, our vision, and our mission change and evolve. And now I'm sure you're working on your next hurdle as well.
Coincidentally, yes, and I'm a bit at crossroads to it. So happy to bring that topic out, right? So if you see what's happening in the technology landscape, right, there's a big talk going on about Web3, right, where the internet is moving ahead, right, from everything to DeFi's, blockchains, cryptos, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, there's a big push, and more than push, I think, need for circular economy, right? So I've actually recently been, breaking my head on how can we bring about a marriage between these two, right? Can we do something to create something for the future which is also sustainable, right? Yes. So let's say the metaverse and crypto plus circularity for me is the pie in the sky, right? Again, I don't have answers to it, but once I know what the convergence looks like,
right,
I think the hard stuff will follow.
Oh, I'm excited to watch how you move forward with that. And it's just, I'm an observer. I'm just an armchair, as we say here in Boston, armchair observer of how all that is going down. And, there's, and I'm old enough to know how things can evolve and then fizzle out, or evolve and stay with us decade after decade. So it's hard to, and staying curious, right, Naveen, as to how that will come out. And I'm excited to see how you bring all of that together in your own landscape. And speaking of which, what is the startup landscape like in Berlin? Is there a lot of support for founders? I know here in Boston in the US, we have a lot of major cities with a lot of support, but there are sometimes pockets that entrepreneurship is growing, but not getting the support. What's it like in Berlin?
So the startup ecosystem in Berlin is very exuberant, right? And you have the right kind of support from the community, right? So you will meet so many like-minded founders, successful founders, people who really push you for what you're doing and not bring you down. So that I absolutely love that community, the network, be it founders, ex-founders, angels, budding founders, new founders. Everyone is supporting each other and doing it. And I think I'm going to make a slightly problematic statement here, but I do wish the city did more to it, and the government did more to it.
Yes,
I definitely see more initiatives outside of Berlin, but in general Germany, putting that, and that's why it's incredible what the community has achieved without that support, right? There are still some very basic issues of how ESOPs should be treated, how we could incentivize more to early employees, the taxations and everything, which would have really given more boost to the ecosystem. But even without that, just because the community is so strong and everyone is so supportive of each other when you're trying to build something, the ecosystem of accelerators and venture builders are also very good here. So, and I think that's come up in the roadmap, right? So if you see what Berlin has achieved in the past 6, 7, 10 years, it's commendable. I mean, I don't know, 10 years back, anyone was associating Berlin with a startup chapter and stuff, and suddenly it's on the map.
It's exciting to hear. Well, I had a guest on around the 23rd of November who was from Singapore. And that is a great example of the government investing. I mean, that country has under 6 million citizens, and they are the home of 10 unicorns. The government cares deeply. And after COVID hit, the government stepped in a lot. So I feel that with you. One final question before we wrap up, because I always love to hear from my guests. When you have felt inadequate as a leader, as a founder, what worked for you in shifting your mindset?
I think as a founder, I think your life is always sinusoidal, right? And then you have days where you actually absolutely feel inadequate. So I have multiple of such cases, but more relatable recently, right? I think the biggest learning, also one of the biggest learnings of recent times for me, is really when the pandemic hit, right? We were at the prime of our business in 2019, right? We had enormous plans for 2020, scaling up, expansion, and so on and so forth. And then suddenly the pandemic hit. The business started to suffer, started going down, because we were in that segment that initially saw a lot of detraction in that, right? And then suddenly you have to manage a remote team, and not only manage them, keep them motivated, right? So I think that's where I felt a kind of helpless, and had to walk my path and figure out what works and what doesn't work. Because also during that time you're self-struggling, right? So when as a founder you're seeing your business down, and also dealing with the stress that comes with the pandemic situation in general, it's tough. You're under stress. It's tough to keep you motivated, but then you also need to keep your team motivated and do this. Luckily, I found a way around that. My family was very supportive on that. My wife was extremely supportive, and we figured a way out, and and then that's what I said when I started the show, right? The most thankful I feel about is that I'm healthy, right? And that's the attitude I kept there, right? Look, I'm safe, my family's safe, my close ones are safe. I can only thank God for what it is, right? So we took that phase. We actually motivated ourselves and said, look, this is a challenging situation. Let's see how we can cover for it. It's actually preparing it for the future. Right?
That's right.
So we had a tough 1 year. Now the business is back on track. We are working that out. Everything's motivated. We found a way to, work with the remote teams.
Yeah.
So I think
you figured it
out. That really helped me shift my mindset,
So it sounds like you took with your mindset, you became curious instead of wringing your hands and fretting. When we can step out and be an observer and then look at what's really important, which is I got my health, my family, my loved ones are healthy. This is an outside happening that took down a lot of businesses. And in your case, you were able to figure out the remote workers, how to keep moving forward, how to keep raising the funds, and how to keep investing the money. Congratulations, Naveen. I am so grateful you came on the show and shared your perspective, your point of view, and your thoughts around bootstrapping, angel investing, and venture capital. Thank you so much. I'm going to pop you in the green room. Any last thoughts before I do that?
Thanks for having me. Right. Again, I think the topic we touch base today is speculative, and also, would have different opinions. As I said also before, there's nothing against capital raising, or it's just that from my previous learnings, when today I'm a founder of a company where I own majority of the shares, I feel much more comfortable, driving my company to a stage that it should be versus previously. But even if when you are raising, right, you need to be sure of what is needed and how much of that is needed, right? And then just parting thoughts, as I said, what pandemic has taught us is more than anything, more than any businesses, it's the people, right? So let's care about them more than anyone else. Let's try to remove our guards, check in with people as soon we can, be it employees, colleagues, everyone. And I think the world or this pandemic really taught, at least to me, to be, the most important trait I learned is empathy. Let's be more, you show that more to everyone around us.
Oh, I'm having an Andelicious moment, everyone. You said the key word, empathy. Thank you for that. It is so true. It belongs in business, folks. Absolutely, with each other. And as Naveen just exhibited, talking and being transparent with your team and empathetic, it's wonderful. And hey, Prachi, so good to see you. Mwah. I said I would say hi to you if you popped in. Thank you. Prachi saying, love the session. Thanks, Andy and Naveen. She's amazing. All right. I'm going to pop you in the green room and do my last minute closing for everybody and wrapping up the show. I'm so glad that Naveen came on and shared his brilliance and his wisdom and his thoughts, as well as the live contributors with your wonderful, wonderful questions. You guys are so amazing. And this founder journey and the ability to keep a business moving forward in spite of the challenges that we have coming in from outside. Until 2020, it was inconceivable that a pandemic would shut us down and teach us these lessons. But so many of you have found the silver lining in this time. And what Naveen just shared about empathy, transparency, and really caring about your team and the people who are with you on this journey. Wow, pure gold. I just also want to remind you, founders, I want to remind you quickly, promise me you'll remember, oh my goodness, that you're braver than you believe, that you're stronger than you seem, and that you're smarter than you think. You really are. You have this. Naveen showed that as well, that you can keep moving forward no matter what, because you have the ingredients that you need. I am so in awe and wonder of you every single day for moving your business forward, doing what you're doing, finding the courage to bring your gifts to the world. You're extraordinary. Can't wait to see you next time. Mwah. Wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. And now we can play the outro music.